Hello, Melissa. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Ronak Sripal, as Melissa introduced, and I'm currently a sixth year PhD student working under Dr. Mark Axelrod in the Fisheries and Wildlife Department. Today, I'm going to talk about understanding the nature and extent of human-wildlife conflict issues with the agro-pastoral communities in Himachal Pradesh state of India. I would like to apologize beforehand. I'm currently in India in a remote location where I have frequent power cuts as well as bandwidth issues. So I apologize beforehand if you face any kind of technical difficulties. I would like to share my screen and go ahead sharing my presentation. Yeah, okay. So today I'll start my presentation by giving you a brief introduction about the Gaddi community, which is the agro-pastoral community in the Himachal Pradesh state. Then we will talk about the link between the human-wildlife conflict and the Gaddi communities and how it challenges their livelihood in the Trans-Himalayan region. Moving
Ronak,
further,
Ronak,
yep, yep.
you're not currently in your presenter mode. If you'd like to go to slideshow and start the slideshow, you should be able to share the slides on full screen.
Uh,
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yep, of course.
Yeah. So moving forward, we will be talking about the significance of the study, the aim and objectives of the research, how we collected the data, and the results and discussion section. So pastoralism has been defined in literature as the use of extensive grazing on rangelands for livestock production, and the Gaddis are defined as the agro-pastoralist communities that raise large flocks of sheep and goats, and they migrate through within a course of 1 year between the high Himalayan summer pastures and the low Himalayan winter pastures. This migration is reported as the largest trans-Himalayan migration of sheep and goat herding in the Himalayan region. Existing literature also describes the migration of pastoral communities in Himalayas as a mutually beneficial relationship between the sedentary people and the migrating communities where the animals gets a resting place as well as a, a grassland to feed on, whereas the sedentary community gets manures for their fields in return. This migration also provides a way to market animal products such as milk, meat, wool, and livestock. So across the globe, the research shows that the pastoral community experiences conflict with wildlife in regions where they coexist and share limited resources and boundaries. Human-wildlife conflict not only impacts human life and also poses a risk to livestock, but it also threatens the livelihood, the psychological and economical well-being of communities, and also the food security of human communities. It also poses an immediate danger to several endangered species, biodiversity loss, and changes in ecosystem structures. Now, how human-wildlife conflict becomes a major issue in Trans-Himalayas. Given the high relative abundance of livestock when compared to wild ungulates in this region, high level of livestock depredation has been reported. The resource scarcity in mountains, such as scarce grazing areas and water, leads to increased tension between the wildlife managers as well as the livestock owners. And geographical distances adds more challenges to people's survival. Moreover, not to mention, but climate change magnifies this issue by shrinking good pastures, deteriorating the quality of pasture grasses, and increasing the risk for intense forest fires and diseases. The significance of the study is that there is an immediate concern to preserve the original identity of Gaddis, the agro-pastoral community in Himachal Pradesh, and also the generation-old tradition and culture of pastoralism in Himachal Pradesh. The agro-pastoral communities have been marginalized and alienated. The land tenure policies are poorly defined for them, and there is an incompetence governance system which makes them vulnerable to these issues. The aim and objective of the study was to understand the nature of human wildlife conflict as well as to understand the extent of conflict. In order to get an idea of the nature, we try to identify the species in conflict, the spatial location, the time of the conflict, and in order to understand the extent, we try to analyze the gaps with the current compensation policies, which are being provided by the central government of India. Also, to measure the frequency of conflicts, and moving further, we try to quantify the average number of livestock loss to human wildlife conflict per year in this area. Now, talking about the study area, you can see a map of India, and the red spot is the Himachal Pradesh state. On the bigger picture, you can see this is this is where the Himachal Pradesh state is located, where we conducted our survey. Himachal Pradesh, Him, which stands for snow, and Achal means lap. It's a 55,673 kilometer square area in the central part of Indian Himalayas, where 17% of the entire land is covered under snow and glaciers, and 30 to 40% is under seasonal snow. The state is divided into 12 districts, and the three major hilly districts of Chamba, which are Lahore, Spiti, and Kinnor. The term Gaddi comes from Himachal Pradesh. Gaddi means seat. It was it directly correlates, thus means that the seat of the kingdom of Chamba, of the Chamba king. The major source of livelihood is agriculture, horticulture, which is supplemented by religious and adventurous tourism in this area. We conducted face-to-face structured surveys to collect data during the month of November and December 2019 in this region. The first participant was recruited with the help of WWF Shimla office, which is in Himachal Pradesh. The rest of the participants were recruited using snowball technique. The survey instrument was administered through a cell phone using a free software called Kobo. Kobo is a software which does not require any kind of internet connection or cellular network to operate. Considering the terrain, the inaccessibility to network and internet, this software proved to be really helpful while collecting our data. The average age of all the 24 participants which we studied during our field season was 49.5 years. All the participants were male, and they followed Hinduism as their religion. Most of them, or everyone, was fluent in Hindi and Pahari language, and only 12% of them could speak English. 29% had secondary education, and only 4.16% had postgraduate degree. Moving forward, in the table, you can clearly see the livestock composition held by the respondents of the study. Most of the livestock was the goats or the sheep, because the people in this area did not find it feasible, or they were not able to manage large bodied animals like buffalo, cow, or ox, and sheep and goats proved to be really economical and manageable. The respondents here mentioned animal husbandry, agriculture, and Manrega, which is a central government guaranteed employment scheme for daily wage laborers to the marginalized communities as a source of income. They harvested milk, clarified butter, meat, and wool from their livestock. Most of this was used for their household consumption. The participants reported that it was very difficult for them to sell any sheep or goat meat to the villagers when they were traveling through the Himalayas, because they found that once the chicken was introduced in this region, people found it easily, the availability and the cheaper prices of the chicken demotivated the villagers to go for sheep or goat meat. And this proved to be a major blow to the economy of the Gati communities. 18.16 quintal is the average wool produced per year by each gaddi, and the wool prices of the wool varies with season and color, which is clearly seen in the table below, where you can see how the prices for winter varies drastically from the prices in autumn for white and the black wool separately. The three major conflict species in this area were black bear, brown bear, and feral dogs. Interesting in this table is that we found 58% of the Gaddis saying that they faced conflict with tiger. Now, there has been very little research on the presence of tigers distribution in these forests. So this was a very key finding of this research. Moving further, uh, as shown in the table below, majority of the conflicts between the Gaddis and wildlife took place while they were grazing their livestock in the pastures, or while they were traveling through the forest with their livestock, or while they were holding up in the forest during the night. Conflicts between black bear, feral dogs, and golden eagle was reported in higher altitudes during the months of summer, and conflicts with leopards, tigers, and jackal was reported during the winter months in the lower altitude when the Gaddis were moving down south to avoid harsh and cold weather in the Himalayas. The table below shows that every respondent reported that black bears were responsible for injuring as well as killing of 15 to 20 livestock per year, brown bears for 5 to 10 livestock a year, and feral dogs for 5 to 10 livestock a year. In this case, feral dogs did not usually kill the livestock, but they did injure them lethally, which resulted in death ultimately. Here, zero represents 0% reported, and 1 represents 100% participant agreeing to this claim. None of the respondents applied for compensation claims provided by the State Forest Department. All the respondents, sorry, all the respondents reported to have incurred minor injuries during confrontations while they were protecting their livestock from black bears, brown bears, feral dogs, and leopards and tigers in past 5 years. Moving to the last part of this research is the recommendations. Uh, Studies have shown that understanding human-wildlife conflict and its drivers is a key component for effective management of wildlife in fragmented habitats where they are surrounded by high density of human population. So we suggest two recommendations from these findings. The first one would be to promote the wool industry in this area. So the sheep reared by the Gaddis produce good quantity and high quality of wool that can be processed and turned into variety of woolen merchandise that can easily fetch good price in the market. Now, if the Gaddis are provided with machines, skills, and financial support to process their wool and convert it into marketable merchandise or products, then the profit margin can be boosted significantly. This will also encourage them and motivate them to continue their generation old tradition of transhumance. Also, this can prove to be a good alternate source of income for the women of this community who are currently not actively engaged in the pastoral lifestyle. The second is we suggest developing an offline compensation filing mobile application that can operate without internet and cellular network. So, if you remember, during our data collection, we used a software called Kobo, which also worked without any internet connection or any cellular network. And it has proved to be a really great resource in this rough terrain with limited accessibility. If we develop with an offline compensation filing mobile application, then that would make the compensation claiming process easy, quick, accessible to all the community members, transparent, prompt, and fair. And the most important, which is with zero to minimum transaction cost. This application should be developed in collaboration with the Forest Department, the Ministry of Environmental and MOEF, which is Ministry of Environmental Forestry, the local NGOs, and the local Gaddi communities in order to identify and specifically understand their needs and concerns. This can also help in strengthening the trust between the Forest Department and local communities. Here compensation becomes a very important or a key part because if you remember, I mentioned earlier that they are not able to sell their sheep and goats anymore to the villagers because chicken has substituted the sheep on the goat meat in this area. So in order to maintain or to continue the generation old tradition, it is very important for them to be compensated for the livestock lost to wildlife in this area. Uh, we would like to thank Michigan State University, my thesis committee members, Dr. Gary Roloff, Dr. Abigail Bennett, Dr. Robert Richardson, and Dr. Mark Axelrod, WWF Delhi, and the research project team, Dr. Rishi, Yash, Tanuj, Rashmi, and Tara, WWF Shimla, United Nations Development Program, Secure Himalaya Project, Himachal Pradesh Forest Department, and the study participants in the Gaddi community. Open to any questions.
Thank you. If anybody would like to ask questions, you can raise your hand or put them in the chat. Just going through and looking for questions. Okay. Is there any sense for how predation losses compare to other losses, like from weather?
Yes. So, Dr. Gary, I also inquired about the livestock loss they faced from diseases, and all the 24 gaddis reported, like on 100% of the gaddis reported that disease was a major cause for livestock loss in this area compared to human-wildlife conflict. So, if they were provided with the proper medications and some subsidized medications in this area, then that would also help sustain or keep up with this tradition. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, he said thanks. Are there any other questions? Abigail has raised.
Hey, Ronak, great talk. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
I was just wondering a bit about what is the current willingness on the part of the government for these kind of compensation schemes that you mentioned, and how might those be expanded, and kind of what's a bit of the politics around that would be interesting to know.
So I'm not exactly sure about the politics part for the compensation scheme in this region, but the government already has an existing compensation policy, which people find really tricky to apply for. So the Gaddis, as I mentioned, are the transhuman communities, and they keep on migrating deep within the forest. So all of the Gaddis mentioned that they find it really difficult to keep their livestock unguarded in the forest, walk all the way from the forest or the mountains to the nearest forest check office, file for the compensation and wait for it. Also, the compensation amounts are really low, and they do not find the worth the time, energy, and the expenses they bear for filing the compensation, and that is why they do not go for compensation. But the government is really willing to help continue this tradition and work for the compensation schemes.
Thanks, Ronak.
Thank you.
We have time for probably one more question. All right.